Yeah, it's just
All right. So this tutorial will be on an overview of Visual Studio features, how to use Visual Studio, and then all the different things you can do with it. So the first thing I want to talk about is this website right here, docs.microsoft.com. It has documentation for how to use Visual Studio, all the different languages that it supports, different APIs that you can use in it. Pretty much anything that you're going to need for Visual Studio. You can go here and see how to do some in C#. Has all these different things in it. And so, to the actual tutorial. All right, so this is what the mainstream Visual Studio will look like. To get started, you're going to want to create a project. So you're going to click on File, New, Project. Then inside this project, you're going to have different templates that you can use. So first of all, you just set your language that you're going to be working in. The default languages that Visual Studio supports is C#, Visual Basic, C++, F#, you can do SQL Server projects, R, JavaScript, Python, TypeScript. Then there's some other templates in here like Data Lake, which has some stuff for data stuff. So we're going to go to make a C# project. We're just going to make a console application. We're just going to call this C# tutorial. So right now I'm just creating the project. All right, so this is what the template for C# looks like. This is all your source code. Over on the right-hand side in the Solution Explorer, it will show all of the different files you have. In here, you can right-click. Then you can either add new folders, new files. Then if you add a new folder, it'll add a folder to the directory that you're working in. So if you want to add a new folder called, let's just call it folder 1. This folder 1 will be inside. If you open up the directory, just on your desktop, it'll show this folder. And so let's just put some code in here. We're going to declare a variable a equals 3. A equals a plus 2. Console. So once you have something running here, you can go up here and press build. This will build your solution. So that's pretty much how you compile everything down. Once it's compiled, down here it'll tell you the errors if you have any. If not, you're good. I forgot to mention, up here you can select what kind of build you want. You can have for debug mode or release mode. Obviously, if you're still working on it, you're going to want to be in debug mode. But once you have your final product or program done, you'll go on compile and release mode. In release mode, it'll be significantly faster. But we're just going to keep it in debug mode because we're not too worried about that. So up here, you have options. You can go start debugging or start without debugging. We're going to go to start debugging up here. And it already went through. It was too fast. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a breakpoint right there, the first line. And to put a breakpoint, you just click over here on this little bar on whatever line you want. So now go back. So now the program stopped there. Down here, you can see all your local variables. Right now, it says a equals 0 just because we haven't initialized it yet. Then it has args, which is just the default parameter command line argument. Now, if you go up here, you can go, it's F12. So F12, it just takes one statement at a time. So right now your program's on the a equals a plus 2. Right now you see the value of a changed to 3 because we initialized it. These values correspond to the statement before the current line. So it says a plus 2, but it's still 3. I want to do that again. So now we see that a equals 5. This is a good way to keep track of different variables. Just keep track of everything. Also, if you go up here, if you hover over the variable, it shows a current value for that. This also works for arrays. You can see the contents of a current array in it. Now, let's stop here. Let's put a for loop in here. Less than 3. Now we're not going to have anything in our for loop. What I'm going to show you is how we're going to make a conditional breakpoint. A conditional breakpoint is a breakpoint that only stops once a certain condition is met. So we can say that we only want to break here if I equals 2. I equals 2. Those. Now we're going to go up here. Now, as the kids see down here, I does equal 2 is skipped over with 0 and 1. So yeah, that's working. Yes. What's that? So you just make a normal breakpoint. Then you can right click it. Then it has options. You can delete it, disable it. Then you add conditions. Then here you just type your condition. It's a normal coding. I double equals 2. You can also put an action here. So if you want to put like a print statement to say you're here, you can do that without actually putting in a code. This helps keep code cleaner so you don't have to go back through and delete all your print statements. So now, say you want to change how your program compiles. You go over here, right-click your project name, or make sure you right-click on the project and not the solution. You'll get different options for the solution. But once you click the project, you can go through. You can change your default namespace. The namespace is just pretty much like a package in Java. You can go here, select the target framework for .NET. Your output type. This is where, say, you want to make like a library. You go here, select class library. That way, it won't contain an executable, and you have to run it in a different program. But we're going to keep it as a console application. Then, and here we can set our build. So say you want to make sure it only produces 64-bit code. That's where you're going here, select 64-bit. That way it doesn't default to 32-bit. You can select your warning levels. Then here, one of the things with C#, you can, there's a neat way of making documentation for it. It's like Java docs, kind of. That's where you put your output type. Then actually, I'll show you how. So let's make a small function. int get number. And, yeah. So generally, how to comment in C#, you can put a double slash for a single line, or slash, then asterisk for block. But if you put a triple slash, it'll give you all this. And here you can type your summary. It produces the parameters and then return types. And then using this way, with that generate the XML documentation, when you compile it, it'll produce an XML document or HTML document that you can open up in a web page. That way you can see all your documentation. So now we're going to go close this solution. Up here, go to close. So now I pre-made this solution just because of the amount of time it takes to generate everything. So this solution is just essentially just a DirectX project. If you run it, it just does this. But one of the neat things, so if you're working on something related to graphics, there's a graphics debug right here. You go to debug, graphics, then search graphics debugging. Yes, we want to allow that. Might be a second. Takes a while to load. And this is why you want to compile in release mode. Right now it's compiled in debug. Takes a little bit longer. All right, so now our program is running. If you click on this window here, you can see it tells you the frames per second that it's running at. This sample project is set to limit itself at 60. But also, say if you're working on like a complicated animation, you can capture a frame and it'll take a screenshot of the current frame it's on. Or say if you want to capture a series, you can be like capture 10 frames. Then it'll capture the next 10 frames for you. That way you can open it up. Yeah, this usually takes a while. So in here, it provides you all your information. On it, it shows the individual values for different pixels that you hovered over. Then it would have your call stack if you had one. Right now, I don't. Then all the information pretty much need to debug it. We'll go back here. Now we're going to stop that. We don't see that. So I just want to keep this project open because C++ has a different way of handling folders and files. So in a C++ project, there's things called filters. What a filter is it's kind of like a virtual folder that only exists in your project. So if you have source files and header files, it'll separate them. It'll put all your header files in that header folder, knowledge source in the source. But these do not exist on a computer. If you open up the folder with all your source code, it'll all be all together. But you can change it that way. So if you go to show all files, this is what actually, or this is what shows, this is what your folder directory is if you click on show all files. Now, once you're in this mode or whatever, all the folders you add will exist. But if you're not, if you go to add, there's no option for adding a folder. It's only add filter. So you can add your own custom filter or whatever. So if you go to your project properties on here, C++ has some interesting things you can do. You can set it up so it produces your assembly code for you, and you can open up that assembly. So if you go here, you can select if you want executable, DLL, static library, debugging. This is where you go through to set all your options for compiling, different optimization levels. But if you go to code generation, this is where you set the options for generating the code. So give me, so I was wrong. It's in the output files. So once you're in the output files, if you go to assembler output, click it down, you can set it so it only outputs the assembly files or the assembly with the machine code or the machine code and source. I'm not experienced enough with these different options, so once I open it up, I can tell you what it is. But let's set that. Then, okay. Then let's go to build. So right now, just compiling and then generating all the files. Then we're going to go to show files. Then we'll be in debug, because I did not set it. I'll be in 64. So well, I'm not sure where to put all the assembly files at. I didn't go through and specify the paths. But that's one of the things you can do. You can go through, set the path. You can make a separate folder for the assembly files if you want it to then that. So now, say if you want to add it, let's close this folder or the solution. We're going to go back to our C# solution. So say if you want to add like a different kind of library, Visual Studio uses NuGet, which is the pretty much go-to for any .NET libraries. So you're going to go to right-click your project, then manage NuGet packages. Then you can browse. Let's just do ML.NET. So right here, or you can search for different packages. You can click it, then install. Now, when you install this library, it'll only install it into the project, not into your computer. So once you delete the project, it deletes the library. This helps with, say, if you're using like an older version of a library on one project, but then you want like another project to use it in more or a more updated version. This helps keep that in order. Now, right now, it's just installing the library. As you can see, it's adding different. It's called assemblies, which is another kind of. It's not a library. It kind of is, but now in our program, if we go using Microsoft. As of right now, we have access to the ML. So yeah, now we know our libraries currently it was properly installed. Then to show you, if you install a library, it'll make a folder called packages, and that's where all your files for that library is. Now, the last thing well, a few more things. So say if you want to add like a different extension to Visual Studio, extension is just another functionality to Visual Studio. You can even write your own extensions for it. You're going to go to Tools, then Extensions and Updates. Then in here, you can go to Online. So I'm going to look for Q#. No, that's not it. Well, in here, this is where you download your different extensions. There's extensions for different languages, so I'm sure there's like extensions for Java. And here you can go in, that way you can code in Java in Visual Studio. Yeah, there's just a ton of different extensions that you can use. So now we're going to close this. So outside of all the projects, you can have different files. Go to File. In here, it gives you all the different options for files, just text files, HTML files. It even has an image editor, so you can have a JPEG file in here that you can edit. Then Visual Studio does have a 3D modeling file. You can edit FBX files in here. The problem with the editor for 3D models in Visual Studio is it's not very powerful, and Microsoft's admitted that they don't put a lot of work into it. They essentially made it so if you're working on a game and you're only working on code and you don't want to open up Unity or Unreal or Blender, you can load up the file in here. That way you can preview it and make small changes to it. It's not very powerful. Yeah, still loading. Well, this is terribly slow today. So in here, you can go in add different shapes. They can just do basic edits to it. I'm not sure how to use it. I don't play around with it too much. So we're going to close that. And yeah, you can make shaders to use in Unreal or Unity here, different images. I am going to show you new project. So if you make a Python project, let's call that. One of the neat things with Visual Studio is you can have different versions of the interpreter running Visual Studio. I'll show you here in a second. So say if you want Python 2 and Python 3 running, you want to test in both. You can open up both of the interpreters and run them simultaneously. Well, I guess not simultaneously, but without closing it out and then reopening it. So if you go over to Python environments, so right here, I have it set to Python 3.6. Then I think I have yeah. So I have you can pick between Python 3, Python 2. If you download some other interpreters, you can set up or put them in here. That way you can run it. Then this also works for, I think, R. I think R is interpreted. But yeah, any kind of interpreted language in Visual Studio, you can set the interpreter right inside of it. Then close this. I'm going to show you one last thing. We're going to make another C# project. We'll make a Windows Forms. I want to show you the drag and drop for creating UIs. So this is how you make a UI in Visual Studio. This is just a basic window. You have your toolbox over here. You can add a button, put it there, edit different properties for it, the name of the button, location. Then to add functionality to it or edit the code behind it, you just double click on it, and it brings you to that method inside your code. Then one of the neat things you can do, I don't know how to do it, but you can make your own components in Visual Studio. So if you want your own like customized button that you made, you can go in, actually I think if you go project, you can add component. And here, create a component class. Then that way, if like you don't want to have like, if you want to do certain things, once you click on it, it will. Then you can even make it your own image for it, for in the toolbox. But we're not going to do that. So yeah, that's how you create a UI. This also works for creating apps in Visual Studio. I know if you make an Android app, you can use drag and drop for the UI. Then it actually works for all three, iOS, Android, and Windows. But if you use the shared template, where you can make one project for all three devices, you cannot use the drag and drop for the UI, just because each of them have a different code base. If you go into each individual one, you can use the UI. But yeah, one last thing. So there's kind of a side program for Visual Studio. It's called Blend. So what Microsoft Blend is, I'm not going to go through much of it. It's a kind of, it's like Visual Studio, but it's just made for editing UIs. It's very powerful. So if you want like to have like a different looking button on there, you can go and you can curve the edges of it, customize the looks of it. It's all in XML. So if you know how, then yeah, a lot of people use Blend for their UI development. Then you can import it into Visual Studio for your basic code editing, whatnot. Then yeah, I guess while this is loading, any questions? Well, Blendless is essentially like Visual Studio. I just want to talk about it. I have no idea how long this will take. Oh, I guess there it is. What? Yeah. But yeah, and here you can just create a project, make the UI for it, import it back into Visual Studio. But yeah, I guess that's everything. So no questions? All right.